News with me, Dan Whittle. Tonight, Rihanna plays Super Bowl halftime show, Harry Styles wins big at this year's Brit Awards, and Paramore are amongst this week's new releases. This is CAC News with Dan Whittle and Tom. We're here to discuss our thoughts on the current issues in pop music. I think we'll start with the Super Bowl. Have you seen Rihanna's performance?
I have. I watched it back today. Very quickly about the Super Bowl. I was, and have been since I was about 14, a St. Louis Rams fan. And when the Rams moved to become the LA Rams, I was debating whether to switch allegiance to LA with them or go for the next nearest team geographically, which was Kansas City. And a friend of the podcast, Jason, told me that you support the franchise, not the city, so I have to follow the Rams to LA. I'm now feeling really pissed off because the Chiefs have won it, twice since then?
I'm not too au fait with American football myself. I did get into it in the early 2000s when I lived with Dan and Alex. And I said that I was a Green Bay Packers fan, but it's not something that I pay attention to. So the football is secondary for me. It's always about the musical halftime entertainment. In terms of Rihanna's performance, I did think it was mediocre. I didn't think it was anything special compared to previous halftime shows. I think it's great that she's pregnant and she clearly loves being a mum, but I don't think that we needed a world stage for her to announce that she's pregnant.
No, she has a lot of bangers in her back catalogue.
Yeah.
And basically performed a medley of bangers in a fairly bland way, just with lots of dancers. And yeah, it was a nice medley with lots of great ideas, but you know, when you're thinking that Maroon 5 did a better halftime show than Rihanna, you know that something's wrong.
I don't know if theirs was better than Rihanna's. Theirs was quite bad as well. But I just thought there was nothing noteworthy other than the fact that she was pregnant. It was almost like she's gone out there to make an announcement, but it's not that she was returning to music. And I love Rihanna, so I was waiting for a new album, but just feels a little bit disappointing. I thought that the performance itself, I think she may have been miming. There wasn't anything notable in the choreography that I really enjoyed. But as you say, she's got a great back catalogue. Some of the songs were great. I thought it was a bit unusual for her to do a Kanye song in 2023. But, I mean, it is still a good song, and she is a vital part of that as a feature. So it makes sense.
I mean, considering how most of the artists that we would want to play the halftime show won't play the halftime show anymore. That's how Maroon 5 ended up doing it, because no one would do it, or no one that we would want to see do it. A hint, there are 3 artists who I would quite comfortably put as like the top 3 halftime shows of all time.
Okay, so who's your number 3?
So number 3, this was quite tight, but I think it would be Michael Jackson.
Ooh, I don't like his show. I think that it was the first spectacle one.
It was.
And it's important for that reason. But in terms of his performance, he stood on stage for about 2 of his 12 minutes, just not moving. The crowd go nuts, which is great. Yeah. But he ends with Heal the World, which has never been my favourite Michael Jackson song. He was miming he mostly mimed after about 88 anyway, most of the time. So I don't think there was anything particularly great musically about his performance. But in terms of spectacle, I think it is. Yes. It's up there.
Yeah, exactly. There's other close runners. Like weirdly, like Beyonce and Destiny's Child is deserves a mention. Like that was great. And there have been some great collaborations. But number 2 for me, and Martin's gonna like go apeshit when he hears this, but I reckon U2 come in at number 2.
They had a year where they became almost politically relevant because of the timing of it. It was after the 2001 September 11 attacks, and Bono had the Star Spangled Banner lining in his jacket. Yeah. And I think that kind of helps lift the performance. But it is a good performance. It's a solid one.
Yeah.
Before you reveal your number 1, my third choice, I would say, is Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. I thought that was a great performance. It's got Clarence Clemons. It's got Little Stephen Van Zandt. And they just do a great, wholesome set. And I love Springsteen's interaction with the camera, where he's like, put the guacamole dip down, step away from the chicken fingers. And I love his closing line of, I'm going to Disneyland. He was really entertaining, and it's a great excavation through his late 70s and 80s hits. It's a lot of fun. In second place, you've mentioned it, Beyonce with Destiny's Child. I absolutely adored that Destiny's Child cameo because it didn't really need to happen and they didn't really add too much to the songs, but it just worked because she gave them the right amount of exposure and reminded everyone of her past as a pop star. I love Beyonce's performance. Stage presence is impeccable. The songs are great. And yeah, nobody can really do it much better than Beyonce. My only qualm with Beyonce's performance is I kind of wish she'd done it maybe 5 years later. She did it in 2013. If she'd done it in 2018, she would have had a couple of more alternative R&B hits from the last decade, whereas we were focused on, up until 2013, her pop hits. Who's number one?
Oh, it's Prince.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that. It really hurts to say it, but it is, isn't it? Like, there's no contest.
It's irrefutable. I think that if you combined the next 10 performances together, you can't come close to what Prince did. He made it rain in Miami. The song choices were perfect. The covers, Proud Mary. The Foo Fighters cover of Best of You is stunning. And it's one of those surprise moments where he covers a song that you wouldn't expect him to in a medley and ending with Purple Rain. But I think the best thing he did was All Along the Watchtower. His version of that is really beautiful.
It's brilliant. And I love the fact that he keeps the marching band in, whereas a lot of them, like the marching bands are sort of put to the side because the whole thing with the halftime show was it used to be the whole marching band thing. And I think the fact that it's still there and like you never thought you needed to hear Purple Rain with a marching band until you heard Purple Rain with a marching band. And then you needed to hear Purple Rain with a marching band.
Yeah.
It is the best halftime show. I have a lot of qualms about Prince. As Dan knows, I'm not a huge fan. Okay, because I very rarely find, for me, that Prince rocks. Like, a lot of his songs are about sex, and it really bores me because I don't care about songs about sex. But on this halftime show, for 13 minutes, or 12 and a half, whatever it is, he actually rocks on that stage the whole way through, and it's great. So yeah, watch it if you haven't. It's irrefutable.
Yeah. I don't need to go on about it too much because if you watch it, it speaks for itself. Honourable mention to last year's 2022 hip-hop collaboration. I really enjoyed it. Was Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, and others. That was a special show. But it was, again, like Michael Jackson, it was more about the spectacle than the musicianship. And I think Prince is the only one to have nailed all aspects that I'm looking for. Entertainment, musicianship. The singing was great, the atmosphere, the energy. He brought everything.
Yeah, and suffice to say, that's the last time Prince is ever going to win anything on the podcast.
We also had the Brit Awards. They're a staple of every year. I think they get a little bit less relevant every year. It seems that not so many people care about the Brits, but there was quite a bit of attention around it this year, mainly surrounding Sam Smith's outfit. And a lot of funny stuff was said about Sam Smith's outfit, but I think a lot of it veered into very transphobic territory, which I really didn't appreciate at all. The performance itself, I thought they did a good version of Unholy with Kim Petras. From the perspective of trans rights, I think it's a big moment and fantastic for that. But the performances at the Brits, I thought the acoustics were quite bad. Harry Styles' performance of As It Was didn't sound great. And
it didn't.
I think that he spends more time slapping hands with fans than he does actually focusing on the songs that made him famous. He's not sold me as a live performer, Harry Styles. I like the song still.
It's not my song of the year, but it would probably make the top 10.
So in terms of song of the year, the nominations, it won Harry Styles As It Was, but we also had H and Ashanti's Baby, Cat Burns' Go, Dave's Starlight, Ed Sheeran and Elton John's Merry Christmas, Eliza Rose and Interplanetary Criminals, BOTA, Baddest of Them All, George Ezra's Green Green Grass, Lewis Capaldi's Forget Me, LF System's Afraid to Feel, and Sam Smith and Kim Petras' Unholy. I would say of those, Harry Styles wins it for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the correct winner.
I mean, can we just say, what a shit list?
It's not great. Considering all the music that we've reviewed in the last 12 months, it's not great. Lewis Capaldi, I still can't fathom how he's still maintaining popularity. I understand that it's due to his approachability and the way that he markets himself on social media as being a bit of a comedian and quite a funny guy, but I think that he is just an open mic singer with not a particularly strong voice or a pleasant voice to listen to, who has just been thrust into the spotlight because he happens to be quite funny.
And he's got a famous uncle, hasn't he?
Oh, is he? Oh, is it the guy from... Oh, now that makes
Doctor
sense.
Who. I'm pretty sure they're related.
The guy from The Thick of It.
Yeah.
What's he called? Something...
Peter Capaldi.
Peter Capaldi, yeah.
I'm
I'm
pretty sure they're related.
Not a Doctor Who fan at all, so it's not really on my radar.
If we're getting Song of the Year, I know what my Song of the Year was last year, and I never mentioned it on a podcast episode.
Go for it.
And it's Making the Most of It by Pedro the Lion. It is absolutely heartbreaking. His voice is perfect. It's lovely and mellow. I just absolutely love that track. And it's followed very closely by Can't Hate Myself Into a Different Shape by Brimheim. It would be number 2, I think. That's like a synth pop masterpiece. You'll love it, Dan. The fact that she's writing a song about body image in a dark synth pop piece of music is just great. But no, Making the Most of It by Pedro the Lion is better than any song on that shortlist. I'd even put it ahead of As It Was, and I love that song.
When You Stole the Sun from the Sky by Mama's Gun, the opening track on Cure the Jones, it's my favourite song of the year, but I understand it's not going to win an award. The song that actually won International Song of the Year was Beyonce's Break My Soul. I think that's a great single. It's her best single in probably 10 years. It just wasn't promoted massively. She kind of dropped it and didn't really do a lot, but it's still a great song. Got that house vibe. I love that. So I would go for that, or Bad Habit by Steve Lacy, because I think it came out of nowhere, even though I'm familiar with Steve Lacy and his work with the internet. On a mainstream level, it came out of nowhere. It's full of hooks. Everybody likes it. It was quite popular, but it's also quite well constructed and a well written and produced song. So I would go with one of them. I saw Wet Leg did quite well. They won Best New Artist. I listened to that album a couple of times. It's okay. I'm not entirely sold on them being the best new act. If you compare it to the nominees, I mean, Koji Radical's quite good. Rina Sawayama, her album...
I liked her.
Her first album's good. The second album's not so good.
The second album is very 90s pop. The first album's much cleverer.
Yeah.
But of that list...
Well, you've also got Sam Ryder and Mimi Webb as well.
I don't really care about either of those two.
Sam Ryder does nothing for me. He's the guy that does all those TikTok cover videos and stuff.
He was also the Eurovision entry for Britain.
Yeah, good voice, no charisma, nothing.
Wet Leg probably deserved to win it.
Yeah, looking at the list, Wet Leg probably do. Maybe Koji Radical.
But when you think that our album of the year for last year was a debut album, I think we can all agree there is only one act that should have won that. But
we won't spoil who that is yet. It's not out.
No.
Yeah, that's coming soon.
There were a few debut albums in our top 10, and I think any of those would have been, otherwise we would have put Wet Leg's album in our nominations, which
didn't even consider it for my top 3.
Neither did I.
The other category at the Brits that strikes me as being a bit of a damning indictment of the state of rock music, the best alternative / rock, I presume it's banned, is the 1975. They won it up against Arctic Monkeys, Nova Twins, Tom Grennan and Wet Leg. If the 1975 and the Arctic Monkeys, who released fairly run-of-the-mill albums last year, if they're heading up that category, it's not great.
I mean, come on. Red Hot Chili Peppers, who I don't love, released 2 albums last year, both of which were better than the 1975 or Arctic Monkeys. Who created the nominations? That is the worst list. I mean, there were some major acts released rock albums last year that were like, where the fuck are the Smile?
Yeah, I would have given this one to a legacy act. I would have given this to Tears for Fears. I think their album last year was great, and I think it would have been a good way for them to come full circle after Roland Orzabal started writing music again because his wife died. And they didn't get to finish their tour last year. I was going to go and see them, but I think it was Kurt Smith I think he damaged his vocal cords. It was a real big shame. I'd say it's at least an 8 out of 10 album. I would have given that to them personally. A lot of the category, I think, is quite tokenistic in a lot of cases. I think it also backfired because they didn't separate male and female for the first time. They had them in just best artist. and then realised that all the nominees were male. So that didn't really work. And I think that's not a direction we necessarily want to head in. But I can understand why you don't want to separate them. At the same time, if it's going to result in no women getting nominated, then that's not the approach to take.
I think the approach to take is probably have more nominees.
Yeah.
Frankly. I agree with the not separating it, but you look at that list of nominees for Artist of the Year, and it's shit. I mean, what did Stormzy do in 2022? Did he?
The album's all right. The new album's all right. He's got some soul elements to it and alternative R&B, and it's quite politically driven. It's worth listening to. It's a bit more introspective than I ever imagined a Stormzy record would be. I don't mind his other.
No, I
records.
like his older
Yeah,
stuff.
I think he's great, but it was really quite surprising how, as I say, introspective he's gone with this new record. So maybe worth checking. I think that the state of music is better than the Brit Awards show it to be.
Oh God, isn't it just?
Another thing that's happened over the last couple of days, I couldn't neglect to mention this because Rolling Stone have produced an article of 50 horrible albums by great artists. I'm not going to go too in depth on this. They've picked the wrong Prince album for a start, Chaos and Disorder from 96. He did way worse 2 years later when he recorded New Power Soul. I Rock, Therefore I Am, notwithstanding I think it's a solid release. I thought I'd mention it because Yes are on there at number 3 with Union.
Yeah. See, I kind of agree with them on that album because, like, for me, early 70s, yes, through to about Tales from Topographic Oceans, which would be about 74, I absolutely love. I even like their early stuff when they're basically a Beatles cover band. And then after that, it goes a bit downhill. I don't really like their 80s stuff. I think Yes did to prog what ZZ Top did to blues in the 80s.
Yeah.
In that it goes all a bit electronic and there's a couple of really good points in it, but a lot of it's bollocks.
I mean, Owner of a Lonely Heart is a banger.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
But have you tried listening to the whole of that album?
I have, actually. That's the album where Trevor Horn was involved with it.
Yeah.
After the Buggles. I listened to it because I quite like Trevor Horn and his production. It isn't as good as Fragile, for instance. No. Also, weirdly, in terms of Yes, I listened to, is it The Ladder from 99? That bored me to death.
Yeah. Just going through this list, they picked a Lou Reed album, and firstly, Lou Reed has released a lot of horrible albums.
Metal Machine Music.
Yeah, they've written, it's not easy to pick his single worst album because he's released lots of horrible albums. I'm like, so...
How does he qualify for that list then?
Yeah, absolutely. He's released a lot of horrible albums. Also, Never Let Me Down, David Bowie.
That was the next one I was bringing up. That is my least favourite David Bowie album. It is the most. It's the most infamous. But the problem is most of his 80s albums after Let's Dance, so you've got Tonight and you've got Never Let Me Down, they're just not great.
I had Tonight on cassette when I was a kid, and there is one track on Tonight that I absolutely love, and it's David Bowie doing a Beach Boys cover.
Yeah, God Only Knows.
God Only Knows. That is beautiful, and I love it.
I love Loving the Alien from that album as well. I think that's
a great track too.
Good single. It's better than Never Let Me Down. There isn't really any redeeming song on Never Let Me Down. Yeah. I don't enjoy it. It's not a great record.
But then the question is Never Let Me Down the worst, or is Tin Machine the worst?
Tin Machine, I've listened to. I almost don't really hear it as a Bowie album. He's experimenting as joining a rock band in the late 80s, early 90s. It's completely disparate from his discography for me.
Yeah.
The winner of the list was Yay by Kanye West. An album that I thought was okay. It's better than Donda, but then what isn't?
I can't believe that's their top of the list when they've got...
it shouldn't be anywhere near the top.
When they've got the Cosmos Rocks by Queen at 20, which is really dog shit. To be fair, I don't like much Queen at all. I don't like any Queen at all. But Queen without Freddie Mercury have not made or done a single good thing at all. Seriously, guys, stop.
I would say personally, just because it's from their heyday with Freddie Mercury, I would say the Flash Gordon soundtrack. Because if anybody's listening to the Flash Gordon soundtrack, not just for the amusement of the bit where it goes, Flash, That is the only good 2 seconds on that whole record.
Yeah, probably. But everyone but that is a very good 2 seconds.
It's a very good 2 seconds, but it's not worth buying a record for or making a soundtrack to a movie for. It's got all this esoteric dialogue from the movie, and it's just a load of nonsense. That song is fun, campy, but that's all you're going to get from it. It's not great.
Yeah.
I would say that's their worst. Rolling Stone are always making these lists that trigger me a little bit, and so I'm glad we've been able to get that out of my system. In terms of new releases, because that's what I imagine most people will be wanting to hear from us. We talk on the podcast a lot about what we've been listening to, so this is a more bite-sized version of that. I've listened to 3 new albums this week. I really liked Paramore's new album, This Is Why.
Yeah. I have a problem with this album. I really like it, and I like this direction. But there are 2 artists from about 20 years ago who it absolutely shamelessly rips off to the point where several of the songs on it almost sounds like covers. And that's Metric and Melissa Aufdemar's solo projects.
Right.
Several of the tracks on this could almost be ripped off one of those old records. It's almost to the point. I listened to the track The News, which is my favourite track on the album. I absolutely love it. I really like the record. I really enjoyed listening to it. But the whole time I was like, this is going to be marketed to teenagers as this brand new revivalist sound. Just go and listen to Old World Underground, Where Are You Now by Metric, people. Like, it's probably a better album than this.
I thought it sounded like Block Party in some places. The singles, it's got this late 2000s indie rock vibe to it. I also think that the album's more front-loaded than a North Korean town on the South Korean border. The first 5 tracks are great. My favourite of the bunch being C'est Comme Ça, which almost sounds like a Wet Leg song. It's got an LCD Sound System spoken word verse that I like. All the singles are great, but once you get to about the 5th track in, it ends with songs like Figure 8 and Crave. It fizzled out for me. I scored it a 7.1, but I might revisit that at some point in the year.
It's not going to be an album of the year running, but the singles are great. This Is Why is a great tune. The News is really good. It is very much an album made for Spotify listening. Front load it. Everyone listens to the first bit and then it tails off.
I did check out the other album that people seem to be raving about in the last couple of days, Caroline Polachek, Desire, I Want to Turn Into You. I really liked it. There's a lot in there that I can take from it that I'm going to like. It's got synth pop all over it and clever production, which I love. I have to admit, I didn't listen on headphones, so I had it on my soundbar. I really liked it, but I'm going to have to go back in with headphones because I think that some of the songs sound like they've got a lot of intricacies in the background, and I think that it takes quite a few different turns across the course of the album. I'm going to have to revisit that before I give final thoughts, but certainly liked it, and we'll be revisiting that.
Yeah, it's reviewing incredibly well. I've listened to it a couple of times. I have a habit of what I tend to do every year, and this will come through the blog, I imagine, because I tend to, every week, I'll pick out 3 or 4 albums and I'll put them on in the background, and then I'll put maybe the track I liked the most on first listen onto a playlist, which we will be sharing, I think. Then put the playlist on, and then I'll use that as a way of revisiting the albums that I really want to get back into. And I find that's an easier way of digesting lots of new music.
Mm-hmm.
This album, I had one listen to and I was like, it's very good. Onto the playlist. I will definitely revisit it in a bit more detail, but then I got a bit sidetracked with other things. But I liked it, and I was amazed at how well it's reviewing. I think the only review to give it below an 8 out of 10 is NNE so far, which gave it a 6. This album could end up being like up there in Album of the Year nominations, and we're only just into February. It seems to have hit something that critics really like. I need to dig into it more because it's not my genre at all. Why is it getting so many 10s? I didn't quite get that straight away.
Just before we came on to record this, I did check out Sam Smith's album. They didn't really do anything that surprised me. It sounded like previous Sam Smith singles. I love Unholy. It's really grown on me. I think the live performances do add to it as well, because I think they just had a lot of fun with it on stage. but I thought the album was okay. It's a 5.5 out of 10. It's going to score lower when it ends on a ballad duet with Ed Sheeran, which is the most 2015 thing you could do. And it seems like, this is the attempt to have another song played every wedding in the 2020s. It's too short. It's too unremarkable for that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend checking it out unless you're a particular fan of Sam Smith.
So far this year, I've enjoyed 27 albums. This year is shaping up for me to be a much better year than last year because post-rock is back. Like, it is absolutely
Did it ever go away?
Last year, a lot of very relatively big, I should say, post-rock bands released albums that were a little bit disappointing. I would probably say the same about 2021, despite the fact Mogwai made our album of the year list. This year, they are on form. So far, Hammock have released Love in the Void, and I absolutely fucking love it. L1011, they released a single called New Year's Day last year, and I was like, please let the album come out. This is great. Please let the album come out in time for Album of the Year. It didn't, but it's out now, and it's called Valley of Fire, and it's great. A band called Ropes Inside a Hole released A Man in His Nature. Molly released Picturesque. Panda Rose, Burned Car, Highway, Light, something or other. The Temps de Loop, who combine post-rock and post-metal really well. This is a good post-rock year. Actually, saying that, metal was the one thing that the first half of last year did really well. This year, in metal, I haven't enjoyed quite so much because it's been lots of like melodic black metal and things like that, which I'm not loving at the moment. At the hardcore end, there's a band called Eyes who released an album called Congratulations. That's really good. Catatonia's album, Sky Void of Stars, that's pretty good as metal go. Then there's a band called Ahab, who you will hate, Dan, because it's the exact sort of metal you detest. But I really enjoyed it. And that's an album called The Coral Tombs. It's very doomy, which I enjoyed. I've been more excited by a lot of stuff this year. So I'm just sort of running through a quick rundown. A couple of artists are back with new records that are brilliant. Yola Tengo released a new album, This Stupid World. It's probably their best record since... Actually, have they actually released a record since Summer Sun in like 2003 or whatever that was? They probably have, but this album is every bit as good as that album was. It's brilliant. James Yorkston and Nina Persson from the Cardigans have released an album. It's quite folky, but it's really good. Guided by Voices still exist and are still releasing good albums. Their album La La Land's really good. I love it. Everyone else will hate it. We Are Scientists released a new record called Lobes that is brilliant. The Old Guns are firing, and they weren't last year. Other records that are definitely worth listening to, Young Fathers. They did some work with Massive Attack during the lockdown that was really good. There's some stuff you've never heard of. I absolutely loved the Dream Pop album by Black Belt Eagle Scout called The Land, the Water, the Sky. Thoroughly recommend that album. I absolutely loved it. Hamish Hawke, Angel Numbers, a really good indie rock album. A band called Fucked Up, One Day. It's a post-hardcore mess, but it's beautiful. And then The Murder Capital, Gigi's Recovery. That is the rundown of things you need to listen to, because I've had 6 weeks and I managed to condense it into 4 minutes. So that's not bad.
Well done. You've clearly been busy. I will be adding some of those to my later base. I'm still reeling from the fact that Lil Yachty has released the best album I've heard this year. If you haven't heard the Lil Yachty album, it's not what you think. So Lil Yachty is known for trap, but the new album, Let's Start Here, is neo-psychedelia, Pink Floyd, psych rock. It's really big, and it goes to a lot of places. He keeps his auto-tuned trap vocals, but there's loads of great guitar work, some collaborators with lots of rock producers, and it's just a really good album. I scored that an 85. It's quite possibly going to make my album of the year list already. If you haven't heard that, please do, and don't judge it before you go in thinking, I'm not going to like a Lil Yachty album, because it's really different, and I'm interested to see what he does next. Albums coming out in the next few weeks as well that I'm excited for. Gorillaz, their new album Cracker Island, will be released on, I think it's the 25th of February. I like a few of the singles. They've worked with Tame Impala and Booty Brown. They always release a semi-decent record when they do. I don't think they're ever going to best their first two albums, Demon Days and the self-titled, but it's always worth checking out. The other artist who I always think consistently releases a good record when they do, who's got one coming out next month in March, and that's Lana Del Rey. Since about 2014 Ultraviolence, when she released that. Since then, I've checked out her new album on the week it comes out. She's someone I listen for regularly. I don't tend to revisit her stuff as much as I do other artists that I love. She's very much an album artist for me. Put her on, enjoy the album, and really let it take you to a place. And her records always do that. I don't know if she's going to change it. I don't necessarily think she needs to. So I'm interested to see what her next album sounds like.
I've mentioned them on the podcast before. Sleep Token are very slowly releasing tracks off their new album that's going to drop this year. And it's going to be a banger. They've released 5 tracks so far that are all very definitely worth checking out. The new one dropped today, and I love it, but it's really heavy. It's probably the heaviest thing they've done so far, so Dan will hate it.
Not necessarily.
Probably. And
Probably.
Actually, out tomorrow is an album by a band who I really enjoyed live, but I'm not sure I love their records. Hopefully this one will change my mind, and that's the brilliantly named Pigs. Release. That is the name of the band, and the album comes out tomorrow.
I've heard of Pigs, and I do think it is the worst band name of all time. I haven't heard a note of what they've made, purely because of how much I hate that band name. It's the most pretentious yet silly thing that I've ever witnessed. Some of Al's ideas for band names are better than Pigs.
It's sort of bluesy doom rock, so I'll probably not like it either.
Yeah, not selling me on that.
I really enjoy it.
Those were our thoughts on the last few days and the new releases that have come out, the new releases that are coming out, award shows, live performances. We're going to be doing this every few weeks to give you more content and keep you up to date with what we've been listening to. The new episode is available now on all platforms. Go check that out if you haven't already. Our Songs on Trial Season 3 finale. The Album of the Year 2022 episode will be coming by the end of February, and then we'll be back mid-March with a Beatles special. Keep your ears to wherever you listen to your podcast from, and keep your eyes on our blog at cacophonisessions.wordpress.com, and we'll keep you up to date with what we're doing.
Yes.
Stay funky.